Hi, this is Braden Holtby.
Hey, this is Tanner the Bulldozer Bozer.
Hi, this is Brian Burke from Toronto, Ontario.
This is Daryl Sutter.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carly Agro from Sportsnet Central.
This is Jay Onright.
This is Quick Dick coming to you from Toughnut, Saskatchewan.
Hey, everybody. My name is Theo Fleury.
This is Kelly Rudy.
This is Corey Cross.
This is Wade Redden.
This is Jordan Tutu.
My name is Jim Pattison.
Hey, it's Ron McLean, Hockey Night in Canada and Rogers Hometown Hockey, and welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Now, let's get on to your T-Bar 1 Tale of the Tape. Originally from Don Mills, Ontario, he started with the Score as an unpaid intern in 1997. He would work alongside with the likes of Sid Sixero, Cabby Richards, James Cebulski, and Elliot Friedman. In 2011, the Tim and Sid Show would be picked up by the 590 The Fan. And since 2015, you can now find Tim and Sid on Sportsnet weekdays 3 to 5 p.m. You can also find the Tim and Sid podcast, which sits in the top 5 consistently downloaded podcasts in Canada. Yes, I'm talking about Tim Micallef. So buckle up. Here we go.
This is Tim Micallef of Sportsnet, and you're listening to the Sean Newman Podcast.
So welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast. Today I'm joined by Tim Micallef. So first off, thanks for hopping on.
Not a problem. Both of us, you I think, left the 3 kids at home. My 2 kids will be running around, so if anything were to transpire, please forgive it. Both of them are sick, too, so they're home from school because we're in 2020. We have a negative test, so we're all good to go. But if any of them run around and there's some coughing going on, excuse us. We're real life here in 2020.
Well, that's what all the shows are now, right? Like you can't you can't hide away from real life. It's happening. I'm trying my damnedest sitting here, but I totally get it. So no, man, thanks for hopping on.
No problem.
Speaking of Saskatchewan, you're talking just about knowing the different areas of any place across Canada, because that, people like to know that you know your stuff. Speaking of Saskatchewan, we all come from these, not people are, out on Ontario, you're from Toronto, but I mean, if you cycle it down, you're actually from Don Mills. And how cool is that to know something like that specific to a person? Well, Saskatchewan, I'm from Hillmont, Saskatchewan. Nobody knows where that is. But if you did, I'd be like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool, right? And you were talking about the Rough Riders and knowing we're different athletes. And, well, hell, anyone who comes out of Saskatchewan, if you know the small town and you know something about it, you've already become instant friends with half of Saskatchewan, maybe 3/4.
It's funny because so my background is I've done play-by-play for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and I've done play-by-play for U Sports, CIS, and CIAU, all of them. I've been along for the ride for all of their names. And I was saying to Sean, some of my favorite things were making sure I knew the high schools and the towns that people were from. And Saskatchewan was always great because I try my best. Having traveled this country from ocean to ocean, the one thing I realized really early is people hate the center of the universe, Toronto, if you are living up to that. What I don't know if I want to call it stereotype, like the stereotype of the Toronto person. If you live up to that, people hate it. And like, I am not that dude. I love Canada coast to coast, and I love the fact that I've been able to travel it. I live in the house I grew up in, which is not something people in Toronto do, but I'm guessing a few people in Hillmont probably still live in the house that they grew up in. Is that true?
Someday, Tim, when you're out this way, I'll show you Hillmont. We got about 5 houses in it. It's a hamlet.
Oh, nice. Hamlet. Yeah.
Here's something for you. It's the hometown of Wade Redden, right? Or the farming community of Wade Redden.
I saw the jersey up over your right shoulder.
There you go. So that's the claim to fame. But I laugh about that. Probably people are living in their farmhouses that they grew up in.
Right.
But in the actual town hamlet of Hillmont, it's funny. I don't know if too many people live in the same house.
Right. So whenever I say that, people are like, oh, that's something weird for Toronto. And I love the neighborhood that I grew up in. My wife ended up loving the neighborhood that I grew up in. So we bought my parents' house, and we ended up living here. But to make the long story short, I believe firmly in knowing where people are from, because that's your first olive branch. And I sat in a plane once on the way to Saskatoon to do a US game and a Huskies game. And there was a great couple sitting beside me who were very proud of being from Saskatchewan and not Saskatchewan, right? Saskatchewan. I've been corrected for the Saskatchewan in the past. And so they literally sat with me, and I rhymed off all the kids where they were from. If it was a town that I didn't know, like Yorkton, the bigger areas, the North Battlefords, but some of those smaller towns I had no idea, and they just sat with me, and they were so great about it and gave me a little idea of what the town was about. And then there was one specifically where they didn't know either, so they asked someone else, and hey, anybody know where? And I wish I could remember the town now, but anyone know where Hellmount is? And it was just, oh yeah, that's. And it was also great, and I came to appreciate, and because I love the CFL, I came to appreciate what Saskatchewan is, what it represents, and what the people there are proud of. So
Believe me, that experience you had where they go, anybody know where that is? If you get around a group of Saskatchewan farmers and you mentioned, Frenchman Butte, which is out by Helmond, but if you mention that, oh, hey, Tom, you know where French? Oh yeah, and they'll have this long story. I'm like, how the hell do you know that? But that's Saskatchewan. That's the world in a nutshell, right? Like
it is.
It's pretty cool. When you talk about the way you trying to find out where everybody's from, that reminds me of Ron McLean, because Ron McLean is the absolute best at going into anywhere and knowing facts about people. And you're like, how the hell does he know that? Right? Like,
yeah.
I assume that takes a lot of research. Then you must just be like, you're heading somewhere and you got the book out and you're staring at a map, or how do you? Saskatchewan's a tough one, because Saskatchewan has, like, every 20 kilometers there's a new little farming town. Like, how do you even prepare for that?
Yeah, for me, it was always like, I enjoy the research. I probably research too much on things, and I end up having too much information. But when you're doing play-by-play, or when you're doing what Ron McLean does, you have to have this wealth of information, because you never know what's going to happen. So my thought process behind it always was, so if you're doing a CIS football game and you got 60 kids and one of them happens to break his leg and is lying on the field, I better know a little bit about him, for his family watching at home, for his friends watching at home. If he scores a touchdown out of nowhere, I better know a little bit about him. And so I made sure, because I believe in community and things like that. So high schools, I always had height, weight, year, town, and high school. And I thought, high school, you're always proud of the guy that went to your high school. You're always proud. You always got that Wade Redden jersey up, because he's from the same town you are. And so I knew that was something that I wanted to push. And I'm proud of the high school that I went to, the little one in Toronto. And we were kind of the little engine that could. And anytime I heard someone say, oh, he went to Senator O'Connor, I was like, that's awesome. So I carried that into my CIS coverage. And so it all started with the high schools. And I would Google a town, find out how many high schools were in the town. And if you get the high school, normally there's a Wikipedia page. And on every one of those, like, I know Hillmount has a public school right now. And it goes from junior kindergarten to 5th grade. And if you told me the high school, I would Google that up. And then I would try and find out. Actually, that's one in Toronto. Hillmount, Toronto. That's a different Hillmount. That's amazing.
That is amazing. You know what? I've never heard of another Hillmont before. Hillmont. Here's what you need to know about Hillmont.
All right.
Hillmont, Saskatchewan has a K-12 school. It has a arena built in 2008 off the back of a lot of volunteers and a crazy amount of work.
Amazing.
And after that, it is a giant farming community and one of the most tight-knit communities I've ever seen. And it is a lovely place. But the actual town of Hillmont, and there's more cats and dogs that live there than people, I swear.
So when you're playing minor hockey,
Yeah.
like not junior hockey, when you're playing minor hockey,
Yeah.
how far are you guys going?
For games?
Yeah.
So if you go back to Hillmont, not that far. I mean, anywhere between 15 minutes to Paradise Hill to, I don't know, hour and a half to Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan.
So that's not
something
that
like
bad. Hour and a half farthest away.
Yeah, not that bad at all. When I started playing in Lloyd is where it got,
Yeah.
dicey. We played in the rural midget hockey league, the RAML, whatever that stands for. Anyways, and you'd travel to Fort St. John,
Right.
Fort McMurray, Grand Prairie, Peace River. I mean,
That's
all we
unbelievable.
did was drive. And for
Yeah.
people who don't know how far that is, Fort St. John's like a 12-hour road trip.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the cards you're dealt. You deal with it, and now they don't have to do that. The Ramels no more, I don't think. But there was some fun memories. Kids make the best out of those times. I mean, geez, parents is the ones I feel for.
Yeah, trying to follow their kid to watch them play, and yeah.
Well,
That's
can you
what
imagine working a full-time job and then being like, "Okay, I got to get off at this time, and then even if I drive all the way there, I'm going to miss the first period,
Right.
or I got to take a work day off, a holiday, to hop
Right.
on a bus and listen to 20, 18-year-old kids, or probably not 18, 14-year-old kids talk about whatever." Like, I can just imagine.
Yeah, I know. I always felt for folks in the WHL. Your kid gets drafted at 16. You're from Winnipeg. Like, where does he get drafted? You're hoping he gets drafted somewhere close, and even that, where's that close? Like, I always felt for that. I'm the youngest of 4 boys, so hockey playing, football playing family, and my brothers were good at hockey. I was terrible at hockey, but they were in those spots, and I always thought, oh my God, like, I can't believe how far they're going to watch their kids, or how far the kids are going trying to carry their books with them and actually do schoolwork. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy.
How I've been wondering that. I've heard that you talk an awful lot about your skills in sports not being very great. How is it the youngest of 4 boys, all of them being good at athletics, just didn't?
They ripped the gene pool, man. The gene pool was bare by the time I came out. I'm what you describe. So hosting a sports show, like, I'm what you describe as a good high school athlete. Like, I was captain of my high school football team. I was captain of my high school hockey team. But I wasn't, like, my brothers all played junior B hockey or university football. Like, they were all that level. They all played with someone who was really good. Like, my closest brother played with Mike Ricci and Chris Draper. They were on a team. They went to the Quebec Junior Tournament together. And my brother was probably better than them when they were younger. Like, he was really good. I had a brother who played with Adam Graves, and they came up together. My oldest brother played with guys like Bobby Halkitis and Kirk McLean. Like, so throughout my life, I saw all these great athletes, and I was like a AA hockey player, if you know what that means. You know what I mean? And I was like a really good football player for high school. But if you're a receiver and you run a 4.9 on a good day, you're probably not going anywhere. And I knew it, and I knew enough about sports to realize that I wasn't good. So when I was in high school, I broke my leg, separated my shoulder, and tore my ACL in grade 11, 12. And when we had 13 in Ontario back in the day, that was my last 3 years of high school. So it was like, I realized I'm not doing anything with athletics. And I kind of knew already, because I knew so much about sports. Like, if I wasn't going to be 235, and I wasn't going to be 235, I wasn't going to be a good athlete.
Well, and you're, you mentioned your brothers. Your dad was a good athlete too. I mean, he played back in the day of the St. Mike's of the world. I had Jerry Cheevers on last week, and we got talking about his St. Mike's days and everything that went on there. And I mean, it's hard to put yourself back in that time, because the world's changed so much since then. But I mean, your dad was a good athlete. All your brothers are good athletes. But you just, I hear good athlete when you talk about your high school days. That's a good athlete, but you hit like man, the lottery ball of terrible injuries.
Yeah, I know. I didn't have an injury before that though, Sean.
I know,
I'm
I know, but
injury
like,
free.
it's not like you broke your pinky toe and then, like
Yeah,
some people progress at different times. I mean, you're a good athlete, good high school athlete. Sorry, you still had time there if you continue to develop and you really chased it. I
yeah,
mean, shit. I listened to you talk about, you and Sid, for that matter, talk about. I like your hard work, right? Your hard work beats talent when the talent doesn't work. And I mean, your case in point. For the listeners that don't know, we were supposed to do this a couple days ago, and then you asked me what questions you wanted to ask me about. And one of the things that I'm fascinated with your story about is, for people who don't remember, like the score was awesome. The score was right in my like heyday, right? Of playing junior hockey and flipping it on and watching you guys do all sorts of shenanigans and just having the lovely banter, right? Like it was a time in sports that was a lot of fun because I mean the score was doing well, but you also had the breakout of guys like Jay Onright and Dan O'Toole, thank you. And so being in the locker room, it was literally like flip to whatever channel you want and you just had awesome stuff going on. But, in researching you and realizing you were getting $100 a week for working a 40-hour week and then moving back in with your parents, I'm going like, man, that must have been tough. Like, there's no way that wasn't tough. Like, doing lots of fun things, but I could have heard this wrong, but did your buddies nickname you CIS women's basketball?
Yeah. That's amazing research, by the way. That is, as a guy who does research, that is awesome research. But yes, my buddy's nickname, it was actually CIS women's volleyball.
Oh, volleyball.
Yeah, because and they would change it. So maybe I did tell the story that you heard CIS women's basketball, but they used to that was their insult to me, and I said, well, it's going to get me somewhere here, and plus I just loved doing it. Like I honestly had a passion for doing it, no matter what it was. Like volleyball was the first thing that I ever did, but it's funny that it what we're doing now is so fun and you're in front of the national audience, but not everyone, but a vast majority of the people that you end up seeing on TV had their minor league, had their grinded out time, went to somewhere where they didn't know, or worked somewhere for free to get there. And so my sports history definitely set me up for success in this field, because I felt like it was the same thing. Like when you said making $100, well, if you played in the Saskatchewan Loop, you weren't making a lot of money, right? You know what I mean? Like you were doing it because you loved it, and you were doing it because that was the next step. And that's how I always looked at my career, was the next step. And my daughter, look at my daughter. You can come in and just say hi to Sean. My daughter just walked this in because my old man just came over and delivered it.
Hi.
We're doing a podcast. Thank you, dude. So that's my daughter in her sick pajamas, and my dad is now allowed to come over because we got the negative COVID test. So This is a big day at the Micallef household.
How old are your kids, Tim?
So I got a girl, she's 8, boy, he's 10, and my old man who played with Jerry Cheevers, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yeah.
I like how you're correct. Yes, he did. He did. At St. Mike's is 83 now. So he's over all the time.
Yeah, that's cool.
Coffee. Yeah.
That's cool that you get to interact with your father that much, or like have him, lots of people move away or lose their father or whatever. Right. And I say that because my guest number 2 on the podcast was my dad. I got to sit and that, I love to tell the story of its pretty humble beginnings, right? Like the start was a very good friend, my father, and the sound man. And now, yourself on and guys of your standing. It's been a lot of fun and a fun little journey.
So who are I looked at the podcast, and I don't want to turn into the interviewer here, but I love the idea of talking to real people about how they got to where, like, what have you found to be the most interesting people to talk to? Like, because I guess I'm curious the way you are about everything, right? Like I mean, you cover from A to B, and then you go to Q, and then you go back to, M. Like, what's been the most interesting conversations?
Interesting conversations. I did Judy Reeves, who survived the perfect storm,
Right.
and was on a fish, and not as much as we talked about the perfect storm, Tim, we didn't talk about the perfect storm for like an hour of that. And it was just really interesting. Not everybody, she's one in how many millions of people who have experienced something very extreme, and just to see her mindset on life was interesting.
Right.
When you talk about sports,
I'm not talking about sports though. Screw it.
okay. Well, in general, the reason I have it set up this way, and the reason it isn't called Hockey 101 or something like that, is I personally get bored. And what I love about Tim and Sid is your guys are sports, but it doesn't mean you just stick to hockey or the Leafs or the whatever. Like, you guys talk about everything, and I feel like you're pretty well versed in everything. That's what makes it entertaining, at least to me. And so for me, the only way this stays fun, and when you go back to anyone who's successful has their journey of where they work for free or work forever. I'm getting paid less than minimum wage right now, right? And I'm dealing with love my family, but I got 3 children, a wife, work, you name it. I'm this is a passion project.
Right.
So the only way it stays a passion project, and I'm happy getting up at whatever times, or I actually got Cabby coming on Monday night.
Oh, nice.
And the only way it stays fun for me is if I don't just stick to one little niche and keep talking to the hockey player. Because I'm a hockey player born and bred, and those by far have come easiest to me. Just like the guys coming in. I actually I hopped on a guy's show last night, and he was making fun of my Tanner Bozer interview, UFC.
Yeah.
And in a good way. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm not no UFC expert by any stretch.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I don't want to talk to the guy and see what he's about and see how he got there. And so to me, I think the journey is interesting, and there's usually commonalities on how people went from being, just a normal person on the street to being where they are. And people miss the midpoint. They look at Tim and they say, oh yeah, the famous guy, but they don't realize all the stuff that you did prior, right?
Right. It's and I always find the most curious people are the best interviewers. Like, sometimes you have to forget what you know so that your audience might not know. I might have an inside knowledge of blank, like say hockey, and you ask a question that's so inside hockey that your audience has no idea what you're talking about. Now, you might capture 10 people who think that's awesome that you were able to think of that question and ask it, but the rest of the people are like, what is he talking about? So the curious look at people like that, maybe a UFC fighter that you don't know a ton about, sometimes those are the best interviews because you're asking what the audience would ask.
Well, fair enough. Well, I started off by saying, listen, Tanner, I know jack shit about UFC. So all these questions, don't feel like I'm trying to bamboozle you. I really am green. So let's roll with it, right?
Right.
I don't know. I enjoy learning, Tim. So, like when you say you like researching, I like researching. I like learning about people and learning their lessons and taking them, taking what they've learned and trying to apply some of it to what I do. And if I can do that, I mean, any person who listens to a podcast, if that's what they're into, I hope I try and do that from time to time, right? Give them a unique perspective and try and get us out of our bubbles. We're all in our bubbles lately,
I know.
And it gets worse and worse and worse, man.
Yeah. And I agree. And learning about other people is a great way to get out of your bubble and what they go through, and especially different people. I think that's a huge thing that we need to start doing in 2020, even though we have these capabilities where I can sit in my basement and talk to some dude in Lloydminster, which is awesome. And we don't do it enough. So fire away. I'm good. I'm an open book.
Well, the first thing I wanted to know was, like, from the beginning, were you interested in radio? Talking? You talk about you being an athlete, but at what point did you go, you know what? I think this is where I'm going to go. You talk about being a poor high school athlete and you
Yeah.
bombard yourself, but when did you know?
So because of the family I grew up in, I love sports, and all sports. And it's funny that, hockey's probably my first love, and it's the one that I'm least known for in this field. People would think of me as a basketball or a football guy before they'd think of me as a hockey guy. And that was just out of necessity at the score, where we had none of the rights to do any of these things. But I was in high school, because I was the athlete that I described to you, I realized I wasn't going to be a pro. So how do you stay close to sports? And I started looking, and the first thing I thought of was, I'll be a cameraman. I'll do the camera at, Leaf games, and that's how I'll stay close to sports. And I went and I did an internship in high school. I took a summer school. I was a good student, but I took a summer school internship at a radio station in Toronto. And I went in, and they had me gather news that was printed off of the wire, and that was my job. And one guy just took some interest. He was the news guy, and he said, "What do you like doing?" I'm like, "Well, I love sports, and I want to get into sports broadcasting, maybe, or be a cameraman." He goes, "Well, why don't you write me a sports report?" And that was it. I was hooked. I was in grade 11, summer of grade 11, and he read my sports report. By the end of this internship, which was about 3 months, maybe 2 months, he was reading my sports reports on the air. And I was like, this guy, Mark Henderson was the guy's name. And I'm like, he did me this huge solid. And I have no idea why or how. And if that was part of CHFI's, it was like an easy rock station, and he's reading sports reports, you know what I mean? And so I was kind of hooked there. And there was a grade 8 teacher. I was a smart kid, but I wasn't the greatest student. And I hate my son hearing this, who's sitting in front of me playing video games. But I wasn't the greatest student before high school. And I had a grade 8 teacher give me valedictorian with a 63 average. And it was
Valedictorian with a 63 average.
Yeah.
Well, that
Figure
doesn't
that
happen
out.
every day.
No. And I think she saw something. And so I gave the speech. It went over well, and I kind of got hooked. And
Did you
I
ever
could
ask
do
her about
this. She said it was because I got along with everybody. I was a good representation of someone who.
Have you ever gone back to her now and asked her about it?
What's funny is I did, and she still lives in the neighborhood too.
Does she
My
really?
neighborhood, yeah. She still lives in the neighborhood, and she says when I asked her, she said, I don't know. And I'm like, you realize you started my career by, yeah, well, you were good anyway. You knew, it was just, there was no pretense to it. And she was a really good high school athlete and became a teacher. And I think there was this kinship, that there was there's people out there who are valedictorians, and they get up and they speak and they do the thing where they do the thing and the thing. And I think she realized that there was a realness to me that wasn't I think, and we had this kinship. We won I'll tell you a quick story. It's a stupid story, but we won a grade 8 volleyball championship, and she was our coach. And she had her cousin help coach us, who was a grade 13. We're in grade 8, grade 13, gorgeous girl. And we win the championship, and every grade 8 boy lines up to hug her cousin because she's a gorgeous grade 13. Well, lines up, we're celebrating, and every grade 8 boy immediately recognizes, this is my chance to go hug Donna. And they line up to hug Donna. And I see my teacher, and I'm like, this is awesome. And I grabbed her, and we hugged and high-fived. And it wasn't about the and to me, that was her. She was like, this kid's real. It's not about all the other stuff for him. And I always thought that's maybe why she gave me as opposed to you knew you were there. You knew that, which I get from her. I think there's a little idea, this kid's real, and maybe he's got something.
I think that's it's interesting because you just don't realize what little interactions mean to people.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, for you, I don't know if it changed your life, but you taught. I mean, shit.
It did.
What are you now, Tim? 45?
45. Yeah, 44, 45. 44. Gonna be 45.
Don't mean to age drop.
I got depressed
20,
there for a second.
27.
22. Yeah.
Anyways, but like, I
I'm
mean,
catching up to
like,
my hairline.
how many years later, and that's a story you go back to. Like, that's super cool. And we all have those stories and those people who, whether or not you're, I do a lot of work for the Lloyd Archives. So going around and talking to, grabbing life stories of like 95-year-olds to 70-year-olds, call it. And they, even at that age, have stories of back when they're, high school, you name it, about where they have those people who steer their life different ways. And that's unbelievable. It's a good lesson for all people to hear, right? Like, you just never know where you're going and who you're interacting with and what that means to them and what's going to do for them.
Yeah, I'm a big quote guy, and one of them is Maya Angelou said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel."
That's good.
Yeah,
that's really good.
That's kind of I think what we were talking about there, and I try and remember it too. I do, and part of it is from that teacher, for sure.
You disappeared on me, Tim.
Oh, I did.
I
got all excited.
I don't know.
Probably not a bad thing. Oh, there we go.
I don't know if people want to see your face or not.
Yeah, no.
I have the face for radio, is what they always joke with me about. So.
Me too. Don't worry about it. You might have the tooth for radio, but whatever. That's hard earned, man. That's character.
Just sticking with that point for a second. It's a lovely thing for people to hear, because you just be nice to people, because once again, you just don't know what it means to them. And you don't know, I had a ultra marathon guy on about a week ago, less than a week ago. And Shane Mascarin. So shout out to Shane, because he's this guy who's running these crazy runs, right? Like running for like 4 days straight type crazy runs. Super good health, wife, kids, good job. He's a biologist on an army base. And you find out he has serious mental health problems where he's tried committing suicide. He's been in the mental hospital, and you're like, oh man, he's just said every day is hard. And I'm like,
right.
Okay. And so who knows? Hopefully our conversation meant something to him and helps him. That's the way probably a lot of people should approach life, because you just never know what, you coming on the show, whether you know it or not, is like a huge boost, and it's pretty cool. And I'm super excited to sit across from a guy that's, I assume gets asked all the time, Tim. And that was kind of, when you reach back out and you said, yeah, I'll come on. It's like, oh shit. I'm like, all right, okay, cool. Because I assume that podcasts are exploding right now as everybody's stuck in their house. Podcasts are going ballistic. I assume that you guys get asked all the time. And that has to be an interesting experience for yourself.
You know what it was, Sean, to be honest with you, was 2020 and this global pandemic kind of, it shook me to my core, because I was a guy who always controlled everything. And this was absolutely no control. Like I decided, the part of the story that I left out was when I was 16, I lost my brother, and he was my hero, and it inspired me to just go and get what I wanted. And for 20 years, I went and got what I wanted. I wanted to do this, so I went and did it. And if I had to move into my parents' basement and make $100 a week, that's what I was going to do. And so when 2020 hit, I lost it gave me the idea that I no longer have control. And I was like, this sucks. Like, I can't do the things that made me successful along the way. And it reset me back to, well, where was I when I started? I was just some punk from Don Mills who thought he was a high school athlete and then realized he wasn't. And I made it a purpose to be, one, nicer to people, and two, help other people out who are in the same spot that I was 20 years ago. And so I've been doing a podcast a week, and I figure, why not help someone else out and try and learn something along the way, and maybe even learn a little bit. To be honest with you, I've learned a little bit about myself doing all these podcasts and talking to other people and getting a little more gratitude for what I have now and what I've been able to build. I mean, I'm sitting in a man cave that I never thought I would ever have, like, to be honest with you, especially, when you lose your brother at 16, it's not like we came from, this, I did buy my parents' house, but I fixed it up a little bit. I fixed it up a little bit because I've made a little money along the way. So it's been huge, and understanding gratitude and understanding that nothing in life is guaranteed, even though I built it the right way. Doesn't mean that you deserve anything, right? And so 2020 has been a great reminder that I don't deserve jack, and you got to still work for it. And, doing a podcast here or there as a reminder that where you came from is probably a good thing.
That's cool. Of all the podcasts, so one a week, I have to assume it's a little bit going into that unknown. It's kind of like, you don't know me from a hole in the ground. You can listen to me, sure, can kind of get a feel, but it's got to be like, when you get on a show, like you and Tim have been working together or you and Sid have been working together for like forever now. So you kind of know what's coming, right? Like you kind of get the bet. Right. Stepping into this ring and having questions, when you say you learn things about yourself, it's probably because I would assume we're asking questions that you haven't thought about or haven't thought about in a long time. Has it been a fun experience for you to hop on these shows and see
without a doubt,
the stretch of, like, it's a huge spectrum of us amateurs, let's call it, that are out here just grinding away, trying to.
Hey man, that set doesn't look amateur. I'm going to tell you right now, Sean, that set does not look amateur. That looks like a big time setup. That setup looks better than mine. It's been cathartic.
I appreciate that.
It's been cathartic. It's been good for me. And I'm not the type of person to talk about myself. So when you're asked about yourself, it's it forces you to walk down a few roads that probably you wouldn't walk down. Yeah. So it's been kind of cathartic, and it's also made me appreciate how far I've come, because to be honest with you, you don't remember thinking, how the hell am I going to pay my next bill when you're making $100 answering telephones at the Score, but working 45 hours a week for that $100, which set me up, but was also hard at the time. And you kind of forget about what you went through, right?
Well, I completely get what you say when, the $100, whatever. Like, I get what you're saying, the hard work, my not issue, because it isn't an issue. I love my life. I love having kids and a wife and everything. I didn't, I wish I knew what I knew now back when I was 18 and just started. Instead, I played hockey until I was 25 or 6. And when I got back, I wanted to get into radio, and I got steered away from it because there was no money. You have to be the best. You got to move. You got all these things. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, well, maybe that isn't. And, what ends up happening, like 6 years later, I'm like, I hear podcasts, and I'm like, I can do this. But now you got 3 kids. You got responsibility, let's call it. And so now you got your hard work is just, it's different. It's not make $100 a week and move back to your parents. And, in case in point, when I got back from playing hockey, what did I do? I moved back in with my parents, renovated my grandparents' house, which ate up entire year of my life, but so be it, right? Like, I mean,
it's fun.
If it's worth something to you, you go do it.
Yeah. It's, and it's funny because that the injuries, and there's a story about a farmer, and it's a parable from, I'm feeling like Ron McLean right now. There's a story about a farmer, a parable from.
Is it the Chinese farmer? Maybe.
Yeah. About fortune.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for those who don't know, he has his son, I'm going to paraphrase this terribly, but his son breaks his leg, and the folks in the town come over and say, that's bad luck. And he says, we'll see. And they're like, what? And then, the army comes around, and they want to get kids to join the army. And his son's got a broken leg and can't go, and the folks in the town come over, what great news, and then the son gets sick from the broken leg. And it's just you don't know what's good news and or bad news until years later. And I hated those injuries in high school, but they also forced me to rethink what I was going to do. And I probably would have played university football and been a fringe guy on a team and gone down special teams and smashed my head through walls because we didn't know what concussions were back in the day. And who knows what would have happened to me. And so I look back at that and say, that might have been the best thing that ever happened to me, was a refocus at that time. And I had good friends. I have a friend really good friend who played hockey in Europe till he was 30, and he came back at 30 and goes, now what do I do? And I often look at him, and he's a great friend of mine, and now he's found kind of his niche. But it was hard for him, to come home and start as you would at 26
From scratch.
Yeah. And he comes home, very little money in his pocket, a great experience. He had a little fun along the way.
As you do overseas.
Yeah. And has a few more stories than I do for when we have a few pops with the boys. But he had to start at 30. And so it's never too late, and it's never, and that's the part of gratitude that is learned, right? And I don't want to get way too deep, but you learn along the way, like some of these things that I thought was terrible news or bad luck ended up being the best thing that could have happened to me.
Well, the parable is fantastic. I'll give you a good example, like a very close, heartfelt one. My parents, my dad and my two brothers own a trucking company in Lloydminster, and they had their shop burned down I'm going to take a stab, say November, December, somewhere in there.
Oh, okay.
And all their trucks, like everything. So now they have no trucks. How do you survive that? So it's like, oh, poor you, right? Like, this is terrible. COVID hits about 3 months later, and they talk about it all the time. It's probably one of the things that's helped them survive, because they don't have the pay, insurance is paying for things.
Right.
So it's allowed them to survive. And without that, you can't, and so you go back to the maybe parable, and it's like, well, maybe, all right, like, we'll see. And I play that game, hockey players that come back from playing the minor leagues.
Yeah.
Because that's where I came back from, was Finland. And went for, call it 20 years of your life, all you've known is hockey, and you love it. And it's you've worked your bag off to be where you're, I had the same conversation. I just didn't have the bad injuries, right? I'll never make the NHL, but fuck, I love playing this. And could I quit and go do something else? Maybe, but I really love doing this. You come back at 26, and now you're like, so now what do I do? Like, now I got to relearn something, because all I know is hockey.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I play the maybe game with myself and say, yeah, I could have maybe started at 20, but I don't know if I would have been good, because starting later in life at this has given me a little bit of perspective.
Yeah.
Dealing with, having other things that are very important to me in life have kind of given me a different approach to how I do this. And I've heard a lot of people that are on the national level say you got to be yourself. And well, what the hell does that mean, right? I mean, when you're a young guy, you're trying to find yourself.
Right.
Now I'm like, well, I don't know. This is being used. Lots of people say I don't want to get too deep, and I'm like, I kind of like going deep. That's where I'm at, right? So if you want to talk about other things, that's great. But I kind of like it, and I like to think that people who are listening enjoy coming along for that ride. And that's me, and that's why I reached out to you, Tim, is because I watch you, and me and my best friend got in an argument because I said, man, I got Tim on. He's like, Tim, why are you getting Tim on? Get Sid on. He's the good one. And I'm going, we watching the same show, right? That's what's great about you guys. But long story short, the maybe thing, and when you start, it doesn't matter if you start at 15 or 30. If you give her guns blazing and really put the work in, I truly believe what you always mention is, hard work trumps everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's there's so many places to go there. Like my dad also taught, my dad rode the buses. You can hockey DB him. Like he played in the old IHL. He played senior hockey when senior hockey meant something.
Indianapolis and Windsor.
Yeah,
He's got probably if you don't make the NHL, he's got his name on a trophy that I'd love to have, an Allen Cup.
Yeah, Allen Cup is something that not enough people in Canada know about in our generation, because the generation before us, every small town fielded a team, and those teams played for a Canadian championship, and that's like I wish we could. You know, when the NHL, we're going to sidetrack it. When the NHL was on strike, that was my thing. When there was no Stanley Cup awarded, I was like, let's field the team from every hamlet and every town and let those guys play. Maybe a couple of NHL players would go home and play for their hometown. How awesome would it be to crown a champion of like they used to in the old Allen Cup days? And there would be guys that would be shipped in from other places, and it turned into pro hockey. But that was the idea, was you represented your area and then you battled for the right for the Allen Cup, and the Allen Cup champ used to go to the Olympics. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And I've heard stories of, from back in like the 60s. And Max Bentley, a guy that was a huge name out in your neck of the woods, player coach for the Border Kings here in Lloydminster.
Oh, nice.
And they used to tell it's the how full's the rink? Well, it's packed to the rafters. I've heard, probably most people have heard that analogy, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, it's full. Well, interviewing all these older generation people, the Civic Center in Lloyd used to get so full, people would climb up in the rafters so that they could watch the game.
Yeah.
And that's for senior hockey. Like, that's awesome. And then it's so different now. So I'm totally with you.
Yeah. My dad told me a story about when they won in Windsor. They won at home. And he said you couldn't see the aisles. It was weird. And it's because there were no aisles. People were sitting on the stairs all the way up. And he said it was like this bowl. And, they fit, I think it was like 6,000 in there, tops. And they sold about 8,000 tickets because you don't get that opportunity very much in Windsor to sell 8,000 tickets. So you're literally to the rafters. So he was the guy that said to all of us, I don't want you riding the buses. I don't want you riding the buses. And it was such an interesting contrast about like half of like my dad ended up working for Ford Credit Canada, and he got pretty high up, and he didn't have a university degree, which is insane to work in the financial field with no university degree. And part of it was because he had gotten connections through playing hockey, and a lot of people respected him for his ability to go to school, play hockey. He went to university, didn't get the degree, but he went to university in Windsor, played for the Bulldogs. If you hockey DB him, you'll notice he's only playing like 30, 40 games. That's because he didn't go to the road games. He would only play at home because he couldn't go because he was in school. So it was such an interesting, for me, being the youngest one. I'm like, well, you made a lot of your connections through hockey. You met all these great guys. I go to the golf tournaments with you, which I always did. And there would be Frank Mahovlich, or there would be Dave Keon. They're still great buddies. My dad and Dave Keon talk all the time. Keon's in Florida, and my dad, played with him at St. Mike's a couple years and ended up kind of being his tough guy for a year. So Dave stayed close. I'm like, you have all these great friends and you have all these great connections, and yet you don't want us riding the buses. And he's like, it's a tough life. And then when that life ends, like, what do you do? And so I've always had that kind of kinship and especially like, one of the things Sid does that really bothers me is he'll rip an NHL player, or he'll rip a Major League Baseball player. That guy sucks. And I'm like, you can see my blood boil. And I get it. I understand it. Like, if you're hitting 100 in the NHL or in Major League Baseball, compared to everyone else, you do suck. But where you're from, you were probably really, really good and 10 times better than me. So it's one of the things that bugs me the most. Is nobody sucks. If they made it here, they're really, really good. And that's one of the things that sticks in my mind. Like, if you're in the NFL, man, there's guys back home going, that guy was unbelievable. Like, I played high school football against 3 guys that were in the NFL. and they're all from Canada, all Canadian boys, and they're practice squads, right? Like there was one, OJ Santiago, who played for the Atlanta Falcons, went to a Super Bowl. He was real as a tight end. And there are a couple other guys. Mark Nora was on an Atlanta Falcons practice roster, and Grayson Shillingford. I still remember these names, right? Like, well, what are we, 25 years later? They were on a practice roster in the NFL. And when I watched them play, this was unbelievable. So I always try and keep that in the back of my mind. And when Sid does that, I think that's what separates us. There's like a type of person that would say that guy sucks and be perfectly okay with it. And then I think like you and me, we've seen guys who made it, maybe played one game, scored one goal, who were the greatest athlete that I've ever seen in my life.
It's got to be hard for well, just take the NHL, for example, right? How many of those fourth-line guys were the leading goal scorer of their WHL team or whatever team it is? And then to get to finally, you're knocking on the door.
Yeah.
Listen, we don't want you scoring goals anymore. Like, all we want you to do is shut down the opposing. That takes a very
Mike
mature, yeah, right?
Ricci was a CHL Player of the Year. Played with my brother, which is why I know, in Peterborough. And he gets drafted to Philadelphia. They trade him in the Eric Lindros deal to Quebec, where they've got 100 skill guys. And they look at him and go, can you be a third liner or a fourth liner? I'm a CHL Player of the Year. Right? And he did it. And he won a cup.
It takes a mature guy to do that, right? Like, imagine being 18 or 20, right? And being told, listen, we know you can put the puck in the net. We don't really care because we got Connor McDavid ahead of you. And he ain't going to start checking tomorrow. So you have to.
Right.
I can see how people get sour about that.
Yeah.
But
Ricci scored 20 in his rookie year. Right. And then they said, all right, you're going to be a checker because in Quebec and then Colorado because we got
Sakic and
Forsberg, Sakic. Yeah.
like just a wealth of talent.
Yeah. So he went down. So it's I always look at that and think like, wow, that would be tough.
You know, going back to your career, Tim, was there ever a point? I know you said you were willing to do whatever it took, but along the way, especially in those first, call it year, call it 5 years, I don't know what the time frame is. Was there ever a period you started to doubt what you were doing? Like, or was there progression every year where you could physically notice and be like, no, man, like after year one, I was still in good mood. After year two, I was still in a good mood.
Yeah. I think it was lucky that way. And it was because we were at the Score where there was not a lot of money at the Score, and we were going up against the big boys at Sportsnet and TSN. So if you worked, they would give you opportunity. Like if you worked hard, they would give you opportunity. So I had, Sid and I hosted a show called Score Tonight, and
which was fantastic.
I enjoyed it, and I firmly believe that the success of Score Tonight allowed Jay and Dan to go and do what Jay and Dan were doing, because they saw that it worked on whatever level we were doing it at, and TSN allowed them to be themselves. But the Score had no money, and we turned this show off because there was no money, and we couldn't afford to keep doing it. And they're like, why don't you just do sections of the show and we'll just play them all night instead of employing a crew that has to do a live show for an hour and a half or whatever it was. And it was just like, oh, like this is so but I had, another show called The Score in the NFL, and I was doing university football, and I should have been so insulted by the fact that they took a show off the air that was doing really well, comparatively speaking, but cost them too much money. But I was so busy, I didn't even realize that I should have been insulted. You know what I mean? Like I had so many other things going on. And to this day, Sid's still pissed off about it. And I'm still like, I had too much going on anyway. And I was about to get married too. And I was about to have a kid. And, so I kind of never really had there was one moment, I was an intern, and the interns got food. That's what you did. And I was at the point where I was starting to get paid work, and I felt like I was progressing. And they opened up a Peel pub in downtown Toronto. If anyone's ever been to Montreal, there's a famous Peel pub there, and it's where you go to drink, and they give you really cheap food. So they opened up a Peel pub in downtown Toronto, and the Score staff would eat there or order from there all the time because it was like $3 for a plate of spaghetti. Right? Like you could get poutine for $1.50.
I got to stop you for a second. A peel pub. Now, are we talking peelers? Or we
No.
no.
No, we're talking about yeah. I mean, you probably saw a few in there eating, but whatever. That's a story for another day. So I go.
Wait. Why is it called a peel pub then? Obviously, I'm not cultured.
It was on Peel Street in Montreal, in downtown Montreal. And if you
Okay.
ever went and drank in downtown Montreal, like if anyone listening right now did a night in Montreal or did a few nights in Montreal, they probably went to the Peel pub and they probably don't remember going to the Peel pub. It was a sawdust on the floor, right? Like sweep up the puke kind of place, and they gave you cheap food. Like that's what it was.
Okay, gotcha.
And so I'll say I'm going to get the food today. What does everyone want? And I remember walking back on King Street in downtown Toronto, which is the entertainment district where all the clubs are. And I'm 21. I got a full head of hair. I was a decent looking kid when I was younger, and the clubs are not emptying out. They're probably like filling up. And I'm walking down the street with what felt like 8 2-4. Like they gave me 2-4 boxes to put the food in, and I'm carrying it, and it's above my head. So I'm walking down the street, and I'm like this, holding 2-4s full of food for everybody else, and all these people are going out to party, and I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, I could be out partying with these people or carrying this food. And I remember thinking in my head, like it was a big turning point. And I go, that's what you got to do. And so it rattled me. And I remember it to this day because there was a decision every night I went to work, and it was nights and weekends, and you'd come out and you'd finish your job, and people would be rolling out of the bars, laughing, drunk. And, I'm driving home in my beat up 1989 Ford Escort. And so, which I had till probably about 2000. And so there's moments like that where you're wondering what the hell you're doing. But I had such a tough life since my brother passed when I was 16. I always just thought, this will get me there. If I get this will help me get to the spot that I want to be. So that was always kind of in the back of my mind, was I had lived this tough life, these injuries, this failed dream of athletics, and losing your brother, who was my hero. All those things led to me just never really giving up, and that this was the key to the next step.
I've heard you talk about it off and on, but in all my research, I couldn't get a whole lot about your brother.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're 16 and your brother passed away. What happened?
Yeah. So he was a remarkable worker, and he was sorry, my dog's running downstairs at a perfect time. So he was a remarkable worker, great athlete, played AAA hockey and played football. And he went to Western and was a running back at Western. And for the CFL fans out there, he was in his freshman year, his first year, he was behind Blake Marshall, who was a pretty good running back, played a lot of time in the CFL. And the guy after him was Dwayne Ford, who was the exact same thing. And my brother got hurt, and he started struggling mentally. And he went back to university after taking some time off, was in the hospital dealing with mental issues. And then he went back, and he got his MBA from Western, which is a pretty good university, their business program, probably one of the best in Canada. And he got it in 2 years after leaving after his freshman year. So it was like 3.5 years of real time. He had done his undergraduate and graduated from the MBA program at Western. He was just this hard worker. And so he ended up struggling again once he got into the work world, because he never took any time. And so he ended up taking his life when I was 16 years old. he was 25.
Oh shit.
So I've said, like, interviewing other people, James Hinchlif's one of them, who had that horrific accident. And I said to him something that I say a lot, and perspective is often expensive. And to get the perspective at 16 was remarkably expensive, but you get it, right? Like, there's no way, unless you hide from it, you don't understand a little bit more about life when you go through something like that. And so I think I gained a huge amount of perspective. And Hinchliffe, when he got injured, I said that to him, and he looked at me knowing, like, he knew what I was talking about. He almost lost his life in Indianapolis, right? And he decides to get back into a car. And I said to him, like, oh, like, man, I know perspective is expensive. And he stopped, and he just looked in my eyes, and he was like, yeah, like, how do you know, like, how do you know that? You're sitting here. Yeah. And I never, we never had the conversation, but I say it a lot. Perspective is expensive. And I think you probably know that. Your parent, your dad probably knows that when, the thing, your business burns down, you're forced to think about things. Right. And so that gave me a perspective on life that changed, that was different than any one of my friends.
Hey, well, I mean, it's years and years later, but I got 3 older brothers. I got an older sister. I come from a family of 5 kids, and I don't even have the words for that, Tim. That sucks, because one of the funnest things I get to do on this podcast is have roundtables with my brothers where we get to be complete jackasses and have some fun, and it means the world to me to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I can just imagine at 16, I mean, that's essentially, my oldest brother's 10 years older than me. So it's very, very similar to what you're,
Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was 9 years older than me. And he was like, but the other thing is that he was like such a hard worker. And I think you can see in my story that I may have learned a few things from him, and a way better athlete. So he was 5'10", 225, ran a 4.5 40, and if he had lasted, he would have played at least in the CFL for sure. But he didn't last there. He didn't last at Western. But it gave me the passion. And if anyone ever wonders, I actually told a story. I was doing my last Vanier Cup, and I knew it was going to be my last Vanier Cup because Sportsnet didn't pick up the rights the next year. So I told the story to, it's probably still on the internet, but I told the story to a guy about why I had the passion to do U Sports. And it's kind of a tip of the cap to my brother. And so no matter what I did, and there were times where I was like covering Super Bowls, and I was doing these things that were, everyone would look at and go like, this is the greatest for a sportscaster. I had my own show, but every year I would do the Vanier Cup. And, my buddies are making fun of me, calling me CIS, women's basketball. And like, why are you doing it? Well, it was always a tip of the cap to my brother, who it always meant something to him to be on TV. And so I always took that and made sure that I applied it to every kid that I ever did. And I have a VHS tape, VHS player right over there. And I don't know if you know the name Paul Hendrick, but Paul Hendrick did Leafs broadcasts. And he only worked on the local Leafs broadcast. He never really got to the CBC, Hockey Night in Canada games. But he used to do U Sports Athletics. And he interviewed my brother after a game. And I have that tape. And I always thought about that. I got that VHS tape and the VHS machine still here. And we kept it. You know what I mean? Just because it was on TV. And so I always, when I did all that research, part of that was for my brother.
That's a cool story. I appreciate you sharing that with me, because it's one of the things, if you search yourself, and I actually hear this a lot on all the interviews you do, man, there's not a whole lot about you out there. And I was like, actually, there's quite a bit. You just got to dig. But the one thing I couldn't find a whole lot is that story. And I appreciate that you sharing a little bit about it, and that's a lot. With every success story, there's common themes, and one of the common themes, people call it luck, people call it catching a break, people call it whatever you want to call it. I assume along the way, somebody didn't do something and open up a door for you to walk in and put your foot in, and then once the door is open and you take a hold of that advantage or that opportunity, you get to go. Did you have a couple of doors open for you along the way, I assume?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the score was the biggest one, and I called a bunch of places. So I went to Carleton University. I dropped out in my second year, and I started selling cell phones at Bell Mobility, and I realized I didn't want to do that. And I was a bad salesman too, like an awful salesman. But I realized I didn't want it. So I started cold calling places, and they all said that you had to be an intern from a university program. And so I called TSN. Sportsnet wasn't around at that time, but I called TSN. They said, you can't do it unless you're part of a school. And I called, every local TV station. And in Toronto, there's a lot, right? Like, it's not like there's only a few. Like, I called probably 10 to 15 places trying to get an internship somewhere, and no one would take me. And I called the score, and they're like, yeah, come on down. And I was like, oh, this is like, if there had have been a perfect spot for me to go, like the hardcore sports dude, it would have been the score. And I was calling City TV, where they'd only do,
it's
a
crazy.
Leaf game.
It's crazy. People are self-defeating. They defeat themselves before they even start. It's just crazy if you pick up the phone and are okay with hearing the word no or whatever. A no gets you quicker to where you want to go than anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, no, they don't beat around the bush. That's good. That's great. That is a pretty, I can hear kids everywhere going, yeah, see, Mom, Tim dropped out of school. I'm dropping out. But I mean, like, the fact you cold called a bunch of places, got turned by that many, and the score of all places is the one that's like, yeah, come on down. Right? Like, think of the score. Think of being on the opposite side of the score and getting guys like yourself and Sid and Cabby. And I mean, the list just, the talent there was unbelievable.
Yeah, James Sabalski, Adnan Burke, Martin Geyer, Elliot Friedman,
Like, I mean, it's just stupid A list, and the fact that one of those came in off a cold call, like.
No, I'm sure more of them did. Yeah, it's crazy, and the no's are the no's make you appreciate it too, right? Like, I was like, by the time I got to the score, because I had 15 no's, I better not screw this up. Right, because you're not gonna get another shot. Got 15 no's. I got one yes. Don't screw this up, you idiot. You better work hard. And it's funny because the first employment letter, I got $30,000 a year offer from the score to do on-air work. So I was doing. They gave me an employment letter, and I was like, oh yeah, no, I'll take the job. And then I said, can I keep this letter? I'm like, yeah, of course you can keep it. So I framed it, and I gave it to my mom, and I said, here's my degree. this is, I got the job. I got the offer. This is where I wanted to be anyway. I was in journalism at Carleton. And so I framed it, and I gave it to her, and I said, this is my degree.
What did your mom say to that?
She was like, 30,000? You sure? maybe you should hold out for a couple more thousand. I was like, nah, I better take this.
What led into the decision of you wanted to be a journalist? What led into the decision at Carleton of dropping out?
Oh, I wasn't ready for it. Because I had lost my brother. I tried to be a good student, and I did a bunch of volunteering. I did all the radio stations and everything, and I had fun, a lot of fun, probably too much fun.
Don't we all?
Yeah, I was good at it too. Like, I was really good at it. So I had a lot of fun, and I just wasn't ready for it. And anyone who knew me knew that my heart wasn't into it, and I needed to try and find a way again. Like, I was lost, and probably the athletics had a lot to do with it. When you're so regimented from 8 years old to 18, and then you go to university and there's no regiment. Yeah. Like, it's just, like, I would get up and I was a hard worker at sports too. So I would work out, this was back in the day, and I'm sure you're the same, where you'd go to the gym and you'd do bench press and you'd do 2 hours, and it wasn't we weren't as smart about what we were doing curls, and then you go leg day and then upper body day, and that was it. You're 2 hours at the gym wasting your time, not doing anything that's really going to help you plyometrics wise. But hey, look, I'm ripped. So that was me. And I 2 hours a day from grade 12, grade 11, grade 12, grade 13. And then you go to university and it's gone. None of it. Like, you're just going to school. And I think I lost that. Like, I was just completely lost because I lost sports. I lost my brother. And I was just, it wasn't the same me. And I think everyone who knew me knew that I probably wasn't going to last. So when I dropped out, it wasn't really a surprise.
How much, I'm just watching the time. I've kept you for, do we got a few more minutes or you got to run?
Yeah, we can do about, Cammy, how much longer can we do here? He said, I don't care.
Well, I got a little segment at the end, the Crude Master Final Five. We can just step right into that. It's 5 quick questions. Or I got one about COVID changes, and I'm curious your thoughts on it.
All right, give me the COVID. We'll do both. We can do both.
Okay, so COVID has given the sports world, it's shaken, like we've talked about, the entire world. But it's allowed, I would say, it's opened up opportunities to try out some new things. NHL, more teams in the playoffs. MLB, more teams in the playoffs. Do you see either of those sticking around? Because
money.
Yeah,
I think the leagues will be chasing money for a while, and I think we'll see expanded playoffs because it brings in more money from the broadcasters, and especially if we don't have fans. Especially because we don't have fans in the stands. And I don't know, I think it'll be regional on how you get fans back in the stands based on amount of COVID cases. I don't want to drag down that road, but I think the leagues are going to be chasing money for a while.
So do you like that then? Do you like, and the reason for the MLB, I love it because I've thought for the longest time, there's not enough teams get in the bloody playoffs. You play that many games, to get the Jays in there, even though they get swept, still good for that team to build to the next year and the next year.
Right.
What's your thoughts on it? So
for hockey, I like the idea of the play-in games because you're already at 8 for each conference. It's to have the 9th and 10th team play the 7th and 8th team. Like, I don't think you're hurting the integrity of who gets into the postseason if 16 teams already get in. We have Brian Burke on the show all the time. He hates it. He thinks there are already too many teams in there. And I'm like, that's the exact point. If there's already 2 teams in it, why not have a playoff with 10 and 7? Well, 10 might make it. Yeah. Well, but 8 makes it right now. And we watched the Oilers make a run from 8. We watched the Flames make a run from 8. Like, they never should have been in the playoffs to start either, but they made the run.
St. Louis Blues, LA Kings. Do we need to go down the list?
Yeah. So for me, it's like, go ahead. I'm okay with that. I might be the opposite of you in baseball, where I always felt like the 162 should mean something. Like, if you're going to play that many games, then it's got to mean more than the 82 in the NHL. And I always felt like baseball had that advantage over other sports. It's like football. You watch football, every game means something, right? And unless you're a really good team and they're going to win 9 games and get into the postseason anyway. But for me, it was like, you watch NCAA football, they lose their first game, it's over. Right? For many of them, they lose 2 games, it's over. And to me, that means something. And baseball kind of had that, where you had to 162. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? Like, you got to be good for a long time. You should get an advantage for being good over those 162. So for me, I look at it differently. I look at baseball. I want the 162 to mean something. Otherwise, you're just going through 162 games, and that can get boring. So make it mean a little bit more. But I think we're going to see it across all. And basketball will do something. They'll do an elimination game to get people in to the postseason. I think you're going to see it all over the world. I think you're going to see it in soccer because you're not going to make the same amount of money right now. and those leagues will be chasing that money. And if it works long term, it'll just stay.
Yeah, well, money,
Yeah.
money, as we know, makes the world go round, right?
I've heard. Yeah.
Well, let's hop into the Crude Master Final Five. Shout out to Heath and Tracy McDonald and the Crude Master team. They've been sponsors of the podcast since the very beginning. Just 5 quick questions. From listening to you, I know you're a connoisseur of chips. And so what is the weirdest thing you've put on your chips?
I don't know. I do love my potato chips, but I don't know if you put, I don't know if I put anything weird on them, but I just love every flavor of potato chip. Like if you go in my house right now, we got ketchup, we got sour cream and onion, we got the regular old Lay's, we got the Ruffle Lay's, we got probably 4 different brands of potato chip in the house. So, I don't know if I put anything weird on it. I will try everything. And I'm a little salsa. I'll put guac. Is that weird? Guacamole? That's not weird.
I don't know if that's weird.
And I've like in university, you put the ketchup, the real ketchup, on a Ruffle Lay's, and you eat it once, and then you go, "This is awful.
This is awful.
This is terrible. I'm not doing that again."
I'm glad that I'm not the only person that's tried that.
Yeah. I tried it, realized it. Yeah.
If with the Tim and Sid show, is there one person, current, past, guy, girl, don't matter, that you'd like to get on that you haven't got on yet?
Wow, that's an amazing question. A lot of my guys are like old school. Gretzky was awesome. Messier was awesome. We had them on. Those are probably my 2 hockey. We had Bobby Orr on too. That was amazing. Yeah, like when you think of like immediately I think of like Muhammad Ali, being a football guy, Walter Payton, and they both passed. Like it's always I don't know if there's a person alive where I go, I need to have that person on. Maybe if we do this again, I'll come up with a few because I'm sure they're out there. Haley Wickenheiser is an inspiration to me right now. Like I love her story. Talk about a journey. Like going from being the best hockey player in the world to now becoming a doctor. Like how the hell do you do that? Like that to me is an unbelievable work ethic. Like I don't know if you could pick 2 harder things to do on planet Earth than be the best hockey player in the world and then go be a doctor and do the work that she's done. She worked with this group called Conquer COVID-19 that did this unbelievable work in Ontario. They were collecting PPE and dropping it off for doctors that didn't have enough at the start of COVID. Like just unbelievable work. And she was a big part of it. She got Ryan Reynolds involved, and it becomes this star power and this group of 6 people on a WhatsApp conversation trying to do good. Ended up raising like $2.5 million and delivering like thousands of PPE all across Canada. And she was involved. So maybe Haley Wickenheiser is a good place to start, just to ask her how the hell she finds that inside of herself to do all of that.
How about then a surreal moment? My surreal moment, for instance, is sitting down with Ron MacLean was just something. I'm probably a weird kid, but I growing up, I was like, that guy would be cool to sit across from and pick his brain, right?
Yeah.
I assume at some point you've had one of those moments where you're like, who's coming in the studio or who's coming on the show? Right? Like when you guys had, and just for me watching you guys, when everything shut down and then you guys got Gary Bettman on, I was like, that's kind of cool. Right? Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But,
doing Gary Bettman from my basement, talking to Gary Bettman from my basement, with his grandson banging pots and pans because he's at home during COVID too.
Was awesome.
Was probably something that I will never forget. That was awesome. But I had the same moments that you would probably have too. Like when Ron MacLean knew my name, or Don Cherry came on and said, "Hey, give me the horns." Like, we've been doing this show and using these stupid horns that we can you hear that? Does that come through? Yeah, it does. Yeah, we had these, and have Don Cherry ask, like, not only did he know who we were, he knew that we had horns on the show. And my favorite story ever was, and I don't even know if I should tell this, but Bobby Orr, who I still watch Bobby Orr tapes to this day of him just weaving through people, because it's like more kids need to see what he did. He came on the show and we just had this great conversation, and he was in studio and I was in awe. And it's kind of the older generation, like the guys my age, I'm not really that intimidated by, because my dad, kind of introduced me to hockey players before, and I was able to meet people that I always thought were, oh my God. So the older guys, there's a reverence. I had this reverence for Bobby Orr, and Bobby Orr comes in studio. We do this quick chat, and it was amazing, and it was a real conversation. And he thought we were, now coming in the studios, Bobby Orr. Bobby played in the NHL. It was one of the top 3 players of all time. And we just had a conversation with him about his favorite moments and stuff. And he loved it so much. Hey, I really like doing that. And I was like, oh, hey, Bobby Orr enjoyed that. And so Sid and I are talking to each other in a commercial. He leaves, and like we look at each other and go, that went well. Like Bobby Orr seemed to really enjoy talking to. And he's like, yeah. Is that real? Like, was it a fake thing? Like, did he put it on because maybe he's just a professional. Maybe he just knows what people are looking for, and he's just that nice guy. And so he walks away with his entourage, and they're bringing him through. We call it the car wash at Sportsnet, where you go and you do like 12 different shows. You go through the car wash, and then you come out the other end. And he comes out the other end. We have a glass studio, and we're on TV at the time as well as radio. And Bobby Orr's coming, and I can see him coming. He's to Sid's back in the way the studio was set up. And he knocks on the glass, and then he gives us a double bird. Here's Bobby Orr, who I guess did enjoy the conversation so much and felt like one of the boys, that he was going to distract us during our show by knocking on the glass and giving us a double bird. And it was like such a surreal moment to have a top 3 player of all time just be a real guy with these 2 schlubs, one from Mississauga, the other one from Don Mills / Scarborough. It was such a like, oh my God, Bobby Orr just treated us like one of the boys. And it was like, for me, growing up youngest of 4 boys, you would understand that. Like, that was like, oh, that's so awesome. So that was probably the most surreal moment of them all.
That's an epic story. The double bird from Bobby Orr.
Yeah.
How about then, what is the biggest surprise you've had with meeting somebody of that level?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't match up to the idea you had in your head. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of people say don't meet your heroes.
Yeah, they'll
never
disappoint
meet your heroes.
Yeah,
because they'll disappoint you. I haven't had a ton of those, to be honest with you. And I'm not just saying that to save it.
No. And I don't mean, and actually the reason I'm not looking for the person who disappointed you. I just mean the person who surprised you. So you thought in your brain, I don't know, Don Cherry was going to be this raw and come in and blow the place apart. And then he's just like the soft-spoken guy. That's what I mean by surprise.
Okay. Yeah, what's funny is you realize as you do this a lot, that everyone's just a person, and the goal should be like you, to talk to them like people. And when you do that, you'd be surprised how little, like Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro come into Toronto and they get treated like absolute garbage. And we have them in studio, and when you have the guys in studio, you have time to talk before the cameras come on, and you realize they got kids and they're working really, really hard at a job. And Shapiro's kids ended up playing baseball, or one of his kids played baseball at a facility where me and my son, not far from my house, me and my son would go and work out. And I started talking to Shapiro about it, and you just realize that, like, everyone, no matter where they are, I don't care, Donald Trump, um, Justin Trudeau, Don Cher, they're all just real people. And they've reached some level, and sometimes they forget where they actually are. And they're not really, they put on this facade where they're not real people. But from my experience, the vast majority of these people that some would deem celebrities or
Icons.
huge names, icons, they're all real people. And that was why Bob Orr was such a surreal moment for me, because it took someone who was on such a pedestal. He's just a guy. Like, he's just a guy like you and me, or anyone that would have sat in one of your dressing rooms along the way. And if it might even be a skill to be able to get the person to that level, but I'll never forget talking to Shapiro and Atkins and thinking, like, these are pompous, like, these guys coming in to tear it. Everyone has the worst opinion of these two guys. And Atkins loves to play poker and hang out with his family. And Shapiro was worried about where his son was going to play baseball. And I talked to the guys at the facility, and they're like, oh my God, what a great guy. Like, what a really good guy. Came in, asked us what we needed, and, if he could help in any way. And they're like, yeah, well, so this facility, I have a tendency of making short stories long, but this facility was just 3 dads who wanted to get an indoor facility for their sons to use. And they bought a factory and turned it into an indoor baseball facility. And it was beside a place of worship. Like, it was attached to another place, like a place of, and I was just like, this is unbelievable. And Shapiro said, hey, if you need anything to spruce up the place, let me know. And they're like, well, anything that you can bring. And he brought over like balls, and he gave them, like, the banners that hang on the side of the Sky Dome that you could see.
Yeah.
He brought over banners for them. And I was just like, it's just a real guy. And they were going to throw out the banners because they were done with the banners. And they gave them to these guys that had built a facility for their sons to play in. And, I try and take this into 2020 and what we're doing in this world, and what you said at the start of all this, when you just got to be nicer to people. And I think if you break it down to human beings instead of what you see on the internet or on Twitter or on Instagram, we're all way better off. And I've seen that up close and personal, because I'm in this business where you get to meet these people that are supposed to be one thing on the internet, and then you meet them and they're actually real people.
That's pretty cool. We're going to leave it right there, because that's a great way to end it. Once again, I really appreciate you hopping on, Tim, and this has been an absolute pleasure sitting on this side.
I appreciate it, and we'll do it again, and I'll be less long-winded on all the stories, and we'll just talk and shoot the shit.
It's a podcast. I enjoy the stories. I think everybody will.
Yeah, I hope so. Otherwise, I'm a failure. No. Appreciate it, Sean, and I appreciate the research. It was fun talking to you, and if you ever want to do it again, let me know. We'll do it again.
Okay, awesome. Hey, folks, thanks again for joining us today. If you just stumble on the show and like what you hear, please click subscribe. Remember, every Monday and Wednesday, a new guest will be sitting down to share their story. The Sean Newman Podcast is available for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you find your podcast fix. Until next time.